when we're referring to source of truth in AI systems, we're referring to some piece of data, something that's recorded. When it comes to the construction industry, our source of truth is going to be construction documents. Unfortunately, in the vast majority of building products that are done today, that source of truth is just a drawing. We can put that together, but it's not data as it relates to AI systems.
Well, very excited for the podcast today because Michael comes highly recommended from a lot of other builders that I respect greatly. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Brad. Excited.
Yeah, excited to have you on. So Michael Bergin is the VP and co-founder, co-founder of Higharc and VP of Special Projects. So, that's an interesting title. Maybe we start there. I think that's a little unique. When you say VP of Special Projects, what does that entail?
Yeah, so Special Projects is a new group for us at Higharc. Previously, I led our product team, which leads our product and engineering, or the development of the platform. And now we founded Higharc in 2018. So here we are in 2025. We've built a lot of fundamental technology, but when we're asking ourselves what we want for the business and what we want to invest in going forward, we felt we needed to elevate our investment in artificial intelligence as it relates to the home building industry. So Special Projects is about expanding our markets that Higharc works in. Right now, we're focused primarily on the production builder market, which I can expand on. But ways to leverage our technology that we have built and to continue to follow the very exciting trends that are taking place in the artificial intelligence industry more broadly and applying them to our industry.
It's incredible. And it's interesting. I mean, you bring up AI, and we'll come back to maybe kind of the specialties and, the production platform, the platform you have built for production, market. But AI, for some reason, us builders seem to be a little bit behind on occasion, right? With technology and forefront, the prehistoric construction world. We're hearing this come up a lot more. How is AI? How are people using construction? What are you seeing, especially you're trying to be ahead of the curve, as an advantage for builders to be using AI? Where are you seeing it maybe the most, at the most beneficial level?
Yeah, there's so many places because pretty much anything that you do on a computer these days can be augmented or accelerated with AI. So the most accessible is in text generation. So if you're writing an email, if you're producing a brief for a project, you are, responding to an RFP, you're producing any sort of structured data, large language models, and that's when I say large language models, I'm referring to tools like ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, which is a very, very good system. It's one that I use most frequently. Google has a system called Gemini. All of these are of a class of technology called large language models. And what they do is they take in some text prompt and then they generate some content. So anything that's in that text format, these tools can be used to augment, to accelerate, to improve the quality of whatever you're doing. There are also image generation systems. There are video generation systems. There are audio generation systems. All of these are advancing very rapidly and are at different levels of maturity. But any content that needs to be produced, let's say for your website, to accelerate your marketing, produce more value on your investment, or to do more with less, those are the things that are going to be most readily accessible for home builders today. And there's so many exciting tools. We can get into some more of the details as we go on.
Yeah, I do want to get into some of the details, but to break this apart, what's really interesting about your comment, Michael, is, I was looking at how I use AI or ChatGPT, right? And I was just speaking in a panel at Vegas Market, which is so funny. They were asking about AI. And I said, well, I've had a podcast. And in fairness, I did not do this for our podcast, but typically being open, Michael, when I have guests on now, there's a lot of work being a podcast host is like doing the research and studying the guest and understanding, some of their history, because it makes for a better conversation, right? To at least know a little bit about your guest before you go on, as you can imagine.
Sure.
I'm sure you do the same as you go public speak and so forth. And so point being is you could go into ChatGPT and say, write 20 podcast questions for Michael Bergin. right?
Hmm.
Or, Higharc, and it'll spit them out and it'll say, write 20 podcast questions, how AI can influence the construction industry. And essentially it's so fast. And you think if I were to sit here and on my own creativity, think of questions or how I could, engage the audience, it's going to take me a lot of time. Right. And this takes
Yeah,
literally like 2 seconds.
it's pretty great.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
what's funny is what you're seeing now the younger generation when they're writing emails or correspondence, text you mentioned. I really like the brief aspect because one thing that a lot of us builders get hung up on when you think about a company bio or a personal bio, right? It can pull this stuff and write a bio. Again, you want to go back and edit it to your own language, but you can get a good amount of information already on its own without spending all that creativity time.
yeah, absolutely. It's extremely helpful to me. One of the workflows that I use quite a bit is I'm working on a project or I'm trying to do something hard. I'll just go for a walk, and I use a system called Otter, which is a voice to text translation system. And I'll just talk it out to myself, got my AirPods in, and then I'll take that transcription, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and I'll put that into uh, Claude, which is an Anthropic system, typically, and then say, let's break this down for me. Turn this into, actually ask me some questions about it. Give me a critique. So you could use it as a partner in that way too. Like you come up with some good ideas, and you're like, all right, challenge this. Ask me some questions. What are the things that I'm not thinking about right now? Um, and I find that workflow very useful as well.
Well, it's like having someone to debate you right there without having to make a phone call to call, one of your colleagues.
Yeah, and that's why this technology is really the first time that artificial intelligence has delivered on its promise. You can treat it like a partner. You can engage with it. You can converse with it, and it feels human-like. AI has been in development since the dawn of computers, and there's been these different generations of AI that have come about. This one, this is the real deal. Very exciting.
Well, you also mentioned, images, video, audio. How are you seeing builders, contractors utilize, those portions of AI?
I'd say it's still early days for home building. As you said earlier, home building and construction, it tends to be lagging in terms of technology adoption, and that's for a number of reasons. Some of the reasons are very good. Um, Maybe I'll go into that first. So, what is the primary asset that we work with as builders? We work with complex assets. We have sales and marketing collateral, and it has to be 100%. 60% is not going to work for our buyers when we're representing homes. Things that they're going to make some of the biggest investments in their life. They don't want to see something that's like kind of almost a little bit like their home, but has some weird artifacts. Then you have construction documents. Construction documents are very difficult for AI systems to engage with today. Really, any sort of drawing activity is still beyond the scope of most AI systems. And that's one of the reasons why we built Higharc. We built it from the ground up to be able to be a system that can be interacted with and leveraged through these means and methods of artificial intelligence. Um, then you have built-in materials, purchasing information. Like again, this just must be exact. There's no 80% threshold mark where things are like good enough for us to use it. So home building and construction more broadly is one of the most difficult frontiers, similar to manufacturing, complex engineering, the development of planes, things like this. Construction, home building, it's not too far off. So as the tide rises, there's more and more opportunity every day. We can and we can go back to the low hanging fruit that's out there right now and where it's going to get to. But yeah, there are good reasons why construction more broadly and home building hasn't been able to adopt these technologies as the leading edge, let's say.
Yeah, and it's interesting just with AI, as you mentioned, with our prehistoric building. But you made a point on number two. Like one of the second things you brought up was purchasing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard other experts in the field, such as yourself, that are like, hey, how many times are we looking? Maybe the pandemic's a good example that you're looking for a certain product, material, a SKU number, and it may be limited based on the inventory of this one distributor or this box store. Whereas AI may be able at a larger level to show, hey, there is product, maybe not locally or nationally, and almost in a different way where you could find some of these one-off or certain SKUs that may be back ordered, locally that you may just not know the context, who else to reach out to nationally or
Yes.
globally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting to consider the possibilities there. We've built a lot of technology to make this possible. One of the biggest problems with that, like if you or I were going to go through that workflow today, um, it's the data that relates to the product, right? You need a very comprehensive representation of what you're looking to purchase, and there's some nuance, right? It's like, what is a replacement product that's going to meet those needs? And it goes beyond just the size of the product. Let's say you're looking for a stove. There might be 20 parameters, 20 different properties that you're trying to match for something that's compliant so that you can replace it. So either you have to do the research and know what that specification is going to be and then submit it. And then you have to hope that there's a system on the other end that can go out and perform that search and then respond it back to you. And then you have to do the qualification, double checking. Uh, does this product that I wanted meet the product that's been recommended? And it all comes down to data. So if you have a very rich representation, like an automated way to say, hey, here's the specification for that product, and then that specification gets sent out in a very structured way out to many different providers, and then you get the resulting product back, then you have the confidence that you can move forward. And one of the reasons that Higharc in our Series B fundraising earlier last year, we partnered with Home Depot, Ferguson, who owns Build.com, Simpson
Mm-hmm.
Strong Tie, Schneider Electric, and others, is that vision to make it so that we have that rich data and it connects all the way out to the manufacturer, the supplier, the distributor, so that you have that full stack loop.
It's interesting when you bring up the specification of product. You talked about complex engineering and why it can work in maybe some other industries. One of the biggest challenges, as you know, Michael, is that in construction, it's very labor focused, right? It's hands-on, it's labor, it's sometimes, I mean, for my world, it's a one-off thing, it's a custom thing. And so you're limited a little bit to some extent just based on manpower and, the human capability, right? Dealing
Yeah.
with all the other complex of life. So the point being is that, again, one of the things that I feel has always held us back is a lot of us can relate to the conversation when you're speaking with a trade partner. Well, this is how I've been doing it for 20 years. This is how I've been doing it for 30 years, right? This is how I've taught. And, that reluctance to change or innovate or look at a new system because we're creatures of habit just naturally as humans. So when you're looking at new product that's coming in, new research, right? As we're looking at homes that are built tighter, energy efficiency, going to net zero, all these different components, how do you think AI can work? You mentioned specifications and complex engineering, but help and instruct and train, because one of our biggest issues is training that next generation, training those that are out in the field, right, on these complex exteriors of these homes. And if there's AIs creating tutorials or something easy where you can understand the training or how to do a flashing detail, how that can maybe expedite or revolutionize, what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. There's very exciting opportunities in that area. That is one of the places where I think we're at the level where we have the technology to make it so that the information that's needed is accessible and available at the right time. There is a company is doing some exciting things in this space. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's On3. Yeah.
I haven't.
So yeah, On3, really cool company. What they do is they go out and they evaluate and they produce their own content for the installation of particular details. There's also, of course, the build show folks. So
Mm-hmm.
Matt Reisinger,
Yep.
and their team. They are also investigating these AI uh, empowered methods to analyze their content, break it down so that you understand exactly what's being installed and for what trade, and potentially in what location, and then make that very accessible so that with a simple search query, you can get the right information. But again, Brad, this goes back to this problem of data. It's like, okay, how do I map that back to the construction document? How do I say, here's my wall detail, and it's here, and these are the trades that need to be aware of it, and this is the information they need at that time. And then another exciting aspect of large language models is the ability to translate between different languages and to be able to understand the context. So, translating a detail into Spanish can be done very trivially today.
Hmm.
So I think that's something that's right on the horizon, and there is some technology today that's accessible to folks that are out there in our industry who want to start experimenting with it.
I think the language barrier is key, right? I mean, we could all relate. Like that's going to be a big part of that transition. Something as you were speaking about, and you were speaking about, the build show on Matt Reisinger, and you're talking about, just how things can be broken down. What was interesting is that it prompted me as you were speaking about that to think about scheduling. Have you seen AI used to build a schedule, right? Again, going back to earlier in the conversation, as we think about writing bios or, eh, you know, um, putting together briefs or emails, it can be challenging. Again, a building schedule is very complex, right? And so have you seen anyone use AI to build a construction schedule?
Yeah, there are projects that have been attempted in building scheduling for the building industry. I actually worked on one. It's been about 10 years, but when I was at Autodesk, I led a research group there. And we were focused on just taking the existing Autodesk technology and being able to augment it through artificial intelligence. And this is before a lot of the developments in large language models. But we did have some exciting progress there. As far as it relates to the residential industry for construction, there's nothing that I could recommend offhand that would be able to be able to understand the critical path, and okay, this trade is not going to be available next week, so here's my replacement uh, schedule that's going to keep us on path towards our delivery date. But I do think that that's another area that will develop more rapidly, again, once we have the data that represents the building. And that also relates to our previous discussion point of just training and instructions. Because if we do have that rich representation of what needs to be done to install something, then we have the data to say this is how long it's going to take, and it's a source of truth, let's say, versus uh, just someone putting in some information about this is how long it takes me to do X, Y, or Z, which can be quite unreliable in the context of AI.
So you mentioned, you said a term source of truth. What does that mean in regard to AI and, that definition, how that applies to us?
Yeah. So, what is the source of truth? So, what's the source of truth for our industry typically? You're going to produce a project. What's the thing that
I
you're
Source of
looking
truth
to?
would be database, right? It's experience. It's my source of truth for maybe what something will cost is having done that exact replication, right, or exact scope of work. When you say source of truth, as I think about scheduling, how that applies to me. Well, I've built this house on a hillside, this many square feet, this modern architecture, and so you've kind of lived through that. So you kind of have at least some sort of call it basis of what it's going to take to execute that project.
Right. So that's we would refer to in engineering terms as heuristics, right? Like it's a rule of thumb. Like you have a pattern that exists somewhere that you recognize, and you have the confidence to say, hey, you know what? I've done this before. I generally know what it's going to be like. So we're going to do this. I'm going to execute, and I have reasonable confidence. I have some risk, because it's a little bit different in these ways. But when we're referring to source of truth, technically in AI systems, we're referring to some piece of data, like something that's recorded in a literal database. And when it comes to the construction industry, generally our source of truth is going to be construction documents. That's what everyone is looking to say, like, this is the artifact, this is the building that we're going to produce. But unfortunately, in the vast majority of building products that are done today, uh, that source of truth is just a drawing. So you look at it, and I look at it, and a trade looks at it, and we see a building because we can put together those lines and say, okay, those represent walls and these represent windows, and we can put that together. But it's not data as it relates to AI systems. So turning a building into a model, into a database, which building information modeling has, tools like Revit, which I worked on in the past, have leveled that up throughout the industry, but are still very scarcely implemented. And also, when they're implemented in the residential industry, they're not implemented at the level that's needed to produce a source of truth for AI systems. And yeah, that's where Higharc comes in, because we built our system from the ground up to be that source of truth.
So, why so passionate about this industry, Michael? Like, what drives you?
What drives me? Well, grew up on a job site. My dad was a builder. Um, Now he mostly just hangs out with our kids, and yeah, it's pretty fun. Um, I was then an architect because growing up on a job site, I was looking at people doing work all the time. I was doing work, and architect would show up. I was like, that's a pretty cool job. Pretty cool job. They get to show up, chart the course for everybody, tell everybody what to do. It sounds good to me. So I went to school for architecture, became an architect, and worked on custom home building. Worked on one project in Western Massachusetts. It's a 12,000 square foot home while I was in college. Worked on that for about 2 years. But I was also a programmer. So like during high school and all, I was writing websites and writing code where I could screw up with computers. And I was really frustrated working. I was actually working in Revit at that time. It was pretty early in the Revit life cycle. But I was frustrated with how much knowledge was lost every time a project was executed and completed. Because we did that project, a 12,000 square foot home. And then another client came in towards the end of my tenure at that company, and they wanted a very similar home. But we just started from scratch, essentially from scratch. We used almost nothing in that project. So that experience really guided my trajectory into thinking about how we could apply technology and automation to the building industry. So I started there. I went to Berkeley to study computer science and architecture, and at the intersection of those two things, which brought me to Autodesk. At Autodesk, I led the development of generative design technology, and we released a tool for the automotive and aerospace industries. It's called Fusion Generative Design. That's now a tool that anyone can use to apply automation to structural engineering for manufactured components. And then met up with a few others, four of us who founded Higharc, and really kind of coming back to my roots as far as applying this really exciting body of technology in the context of construction and homes.
And you mentioned, like, if I'm not mistaken, right, Higharc, it allows AI to work with you building construction plans. Seamless process. Which that pre-construction process is something most of us struggle with.
Yeah, yeah. So Higharc, where we're unique, is that we provide a source of truth for the building that serves all the critical functions of the home building process. So everything from sales and marketing, where the buyer can configure their home in 3D like a video game,
Hmm.
all those options that have been specified, or you know individual one-off requirements, can be captured and then automatically generated and represented in construction documents. So we automatically generate construction documents. We generate all the dimensions. We generate all the annotations. So all of this tedious work that would need to be done on a one-off project can be automated. And then from that very same model that the buyer just interacted with, well, we also generate the bill of materials and the purchasing information so that all of these functions are keeping in sync, with the same data as it relates to the home project.
So when you say purchasing info, are you actually giving quantities and takeoffs too, like square footage counts?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So let me ask you this, because again, I started in production. I think, it was a great experience for me. I did that for a year out of college. I graduated in construction management, and before I got into, commercial and, high end residential. So when you're working with a production builder, I would imagine you're not giving the homeowner this full envelope where they could create their floor plan and, yes, it can automate things, but I'm sure there's some limitations. And what I mean is typically like in a subdivision, you may have 6 model homes. Each model home has different, elevations they could pick from. Maybe there's 3 or 4. They have different options, extend the master closet, 3, maybe extend the garage. I mean, there's different things that they can do. So are you kind of working with the build on this development to say, okay, here's our, 4 to 8 models, here's the variations, and then the homeowner can go through and visualize it and now start picking and seeing how this is put together.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So when we started the business, we were focused more on the custom workflow. And we built several of those houses. But what we found very early on was that production builders and their business model was very tightly aligned with the technology that we had built at Higharc. So we kind of turned our attention to production builders. And now we're actually starting to turn it back again towards custom because we've developed it to a much greater level of maturity. Um, so you're absolutely right. What happens is that either Higharc or the builder or a collaboration thereof will work together to program the home and all of its options. And as you were saying, there's some options like extend the master closet or, add a third car garage, add an extended front porch. All these options are combining with each other, right, to form just this huge space of potential possibilities for what could be built on a lot, even in the production context. So we were looking at it the other day. Someone was presenting a home that at our team for one of our customers in the Pittsburgh area, and there were 240 structural options. This is still in the production model, but 240 options. It's a lot. It's actually 1 times 10 to the 72nd power. So 72 zeros in terms of number of variations because these things keep combining on each other.
Yeah.
So if you're in that world, you have 2 choices. One, you could draft until the heat death of the universe, just over and over again, all these different drawings that represent all these homes over a billion years. Or you could program them in some way. And that's the approach that we've taken, is that you have predefined this giant space of possibilities. And then the buyer goes through in an intuitive way, they make some choices, and that has implications. Some other choices are made available to them. Some other choices are restricted, and we present those back to the customer. And then they customize their home in real time. So it feels like working with an architect, I think, in a very light
Mm-hmm.
way, but it's very fast. And of course, you don't have the freedom unless the builder has elected to give you that freedom. There are some builders who allow you to go very deep into the level of customization.
But it's so fascinating because, as you mentioned, you have this 10 to the 72nd or whatever it is, like endless options. And the problem is, especially from a production builder, like you can only be so custom, right? Before you're not in business. I mean,
Yeah.
and you mentioned how just little things, how it does change the engineering, how it can change the quantities. And, that purchasing department is very important because, these companies are going out to trade partners at a large scale and they're committing so many starts and a flow chart and, so much, uh, square footage and material counts of of supplies and so forth. And so you're working with your software, Michael. I mean, they're able to give the customer a little bit of what they want, some customization there, without it really impacting their business on the front end.
Yeah, it definitely get better insight into what the ultimate implications are going to be. Because if you send out a master plan to some trades and it has 800 pages of different configurations, like how deep are they really going to go into it? So they're building that risk into whatever bid they're returning back to you. So that's also what we're seeing is, when the builder and the trades are more aligned and they have better visibility and confidence in the data, everybody's just working better together. The
What
whole is better ultimately.
how challenging has it been for you to build this platform?
It's been challenging. No, it's been fun. It's an amazing opportunity that I have to build with really amazing people and amazing customers and builders. Um, Technology and addressing a need that I've been concerned with and excited about for so long. We started as a small team, and some of the world's best people in computer graphics and what we call computational geometry, which is the back end technology that runs a lot of 3D CAD systems and building information modeling systems. Today, we're just over 100 people um, all over the United States, and we have growing number of people from outside the United States who are just the best in the world at what they do. And we're a remote first company, and uh, it it is both difficult and extremely fun. You know, Nothing worth doing is easy, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean it's especially in this field where I feel like in a lot of ways you are trying to work uphill. I mean, as we both know, I mean, we laugh about it here, but even point being is we had some engineers come in and train about just something as simple as maybe advanced framing, right? And how you design the house so that you don't have as many 2x6s, 2x8s on the exterior walls, and so changing those spans, maybe using closed cell foam, other things to help with the structural component. But now you have less thermal breaks, you have less energy loss. And that concept, it's really not that hard to design something 24 inches on center as opposed to 16. But the value add, how that changes the home from the envelope is huge. But again, to get the engineers on board, to get the architects on board, to get the framers on board, I mean, it's just something that's simple, how much work. And so I can only imagine from your side, Michael, as you're trying to create this technology and really help people move to the forefront, the amount of work, that's in front of you.
Yeah, you talk about framing. That is one of the more complex aspects of residential building. In some cases, it's even more complex than commercial because of how nuanced it gets and because of the complexities of building with light frame wood and just the technology that's there for automated analysis of the structural components. The commercial industry, most of this stuff is modeled in 3D, and you can get load calcs and you can understand what the reaction force is going to be on the foundation. And in home building, even with the most advanced and sophisticated structural engineers, it's still somewhat manual. They have to do a lot of hand calculations. So there's a lot of friction. Um, but there is huge opportunity. Like I was saying earlier, spent about 5 years developing a structural optimization system for the aerospace industry. And they have it very hard as well. They have really intense needs as it relates to the structural performance of components. So it's very much within the realm of possibility. We have a partnership that's in development with Mulhern and Culp Structural Engineers, one of the largest structural engineering firms for residential in the country. And we're working to both represent the framing for every home that's generated in Higharc and come up with ways to optimize and uh, accelerate the structural engineering process to get a great solution that's both highly performant as well as um, cost effective, which of course is the one of the major optimization criteria for any project that we do in home building. Got to
Well, you
keep the
mentioned,
margins low.
yeah, and you mentioned the the growth. I mean, I think you said 100 over 100 employees now. These things don't happen in vacuum. I mean, there's a lot of coordination. I would imagine there's funding, there's capital. How is that part from the bit? It's one thing to have the vision, to implement it, right? To go out there and do sales and business development, but you also have the back end cash flow from your side. How is that, from pitching your idea to, I'm sure, investors and to have capital? It takes capital to build something. So, how's that arm of the business been?
It's been well. We've been very fortunate to have incredible investors, both from the technology industry as well as from the um, just building materials and building supply. So those partners who have helped us advance the vision as well. So we've raised over $80 million in capital to support
Mm,
the growth of the business. And at the same time, we've been able to deliver really excellent return on investment for the customers who have adopted Higharc so far. And there's a good number and a growing number of businesses who are using the Higharc platform to develop their homes. And I think we've had about 5,000 homes that were configured for
mm,
sale and
wow.
in the Higharc platform last year. Yeah, it's really exciting to make that impact in the world and know that people have homes that are kind of more custom and fitting their needs and a better experience overall for the buyer and for the builder over the past year.
Well, as I want to be sensitive to your time, Michael. I know how busy you are. What keeps you up at night?
Keeps well. Uh, right now, I'm just extremely excited about what's happening in the world of large language models. Again, to the earlier part of our discussion, every week, without exaggeration, there's a step change in this technology. And as I look forward to the next year or two, I'm excited about the potential and the power for anyone to, well, for one, build software that meets their needs just by talking about it, and two, for the maturity of the systems that we had discussed, like image generation. So if you want to have a rendering of a home project that you're working on as a contractor, you don't need to go through a process where you're waiting weeks to get that rendering. And, then you have another back and forth where you're going to ultimately finally get to something that represents what the living room or the kitchen is going to look like to your client, but at great time and expense.
Hmm.
And then taking that all the way through to video walkthroughs. I think that this is coming and it's coming very fast. And that's going to make it so that the buyer experience, as people start talking about these things, is raised very significantly, which for me is exciting.
Hmm.
There's going to be a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of growth, and especially for those builders who lean in to technology and make it a core part of their business. Um, so very optimistic, Brad. There's so much good stuff happening right now.
That's incredible. What do you do for fun?
Hang out with all my kids. I got 4 kids,
Uh,
uh, ages 3, 4, 7, and 8, and
busy.
they keep us very busy. Yeah, for sure. So we got lots of sporting events and um, lots of different activities. We're doing plays, learning music, and yeah, keep us keep our schedules full and full of joy.
Well, you can't beat that. So, for Michael, for those listening, how can they find you?
You can find Higharc at higharc.com. You can find me at Michael Bergin at higharc.com or on LinkedIn or wherever. I'm easy to find on the internet. If you Google me or ask a large language model. And yeah, be excited to speak with anybody out there who's interested in these things and wanted to take their business to the next level. So appreciate the opportunity to chat, Brad.
So instead of Google me, just chat GPT me.
Fair.
Well,
Work
Mike, you've been
flawless.
awesome. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate you too. Have a great day.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.